Welcome back to the Cream City Club podcast. I am Spencer Michaelis, and I'm here again with Gunnar Amalunk. Gunnar, we had it's been almost 2 weeks since we last recorded one. Obviously, we waited a little bit and released that Adrian Hauser episode 4 or 5 days after we recorded it, but haven't talked since the holidays. So how was your Christmas and your New Year?
Yeah, it was really good. I was gonna say it's been a while, so I think I'm a little nervous. I don't know why. It's only been like a week and a half, so if I sound a little jittery, that's probably why as well. But we also just watched that Bucks Spurs finish too, so that could also be why I'm a little tense right now. But I also realized I never ask you how you're doing on these podcasts. So how are you doing, Spencer? How was
It's
your
okay.
holiday?
No one cares. None of the listeners care. No, I'm doing well. It was good to get to see some of my family and stuff that I don't get to see as much around the holidays. So, yeah, it was good. It was nice to have a little bit of a break from doing this and worrying about this, but I'm also happy to be back doing it now. So, yeah, it was good. All right. For the listeners, if you are listening and haven't yet subscribed, please take a moment to do so on whatever platform you're listening on and rate us 5 stars. Follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod to stay up to date on these episode releases. And today's episode, as we kind of hinted at, we just finished watching that Bucks Spurs game. We're going to be focused on the Bucks, mainly on the last week of games. We're not going to cover the stuff that happened kind of over the break that we had, but the two Pacers games and the Spurs game. So before we jump into any of those, though, we did learn over our break, obviously the sad and unfortunate news that the former Bucks owner, Herb Kohl, passed away over that break. We just both wanted to kind of pay our respects to him as fans and really show everyone, I mean, the appreciation we have for him. I think at the time we probably didn't appreciate him as much while he was owning the team. He was a guy who he wanted to win and compete every year at the cost of probably maybe going into a rebuild once in a while and going after some of the bigger fishes, but he was, and his legacy is going to live on forever. But in terms of just Milwaukee and Wisconsin sports, I mean, I know you're not a Badger fan, but the Kohl Center is named after him. He donated a big chunk of money to help get that built. And then just everything he did for the Bucks. I mean, I know we learned shortly after he passed that he turned down a $1 billion offer from Steve Ballmer to Ballmer would have moved the team to Seattle basically, and Cole said no. He ended up taking 550 million from the current ownership group minus um, Lazary, and then donating 100 million of that right back into the arena. So basically, $550 million difference just to keep the Bucks in Milwaukee. So I went through some of that, but Gunnar, I mean, to you, what did he mean, and how big of a role did he play in Bucks history?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a little bit of naive of me. I never really realized how close we were to actually moving out of the state. Like, I just never wanted to actually believe that that was actually a possibility. So and I was younger too, so I didn't actually get to read all the behind the scenes. And it's not like it is now where we got all like, we probably would be getting like little tidbits if it was like nowadays, and we'd be getting a lot of like how close somebody is to buying something or whatever. But I just kind of stayed out of that loop. But as far as like what he meant, I mean, you nailed it. Like when we were kids, we didn't actually really know. We probably, in a way, not like we didn't like him, but we're probably like, why are we always mediocre? And like, you're not really thinking about the behind the scenes of like how much he actually means and like how passionate he is about the Bucks. And I mean, you just have to appreciate that. And the story, like you said, turning down like a quarter or $500 million just to keep the team in Wisconsin. I mean, that's absolutely insane. And I think I saw Frank Madden too say that there was some quote how they wanted to give him like a statue or something outside of the arena. And he said that he's not really a statue guy or anything like that. But man, I think if anyone deserves it, he definitely deserves it. And I would love to see it. But yeah, I mean, I can't express how much. I mean, we wouldn't be here talking, right? We'd have half a podcast. We talk about the Brewers, but um, it's just obviously to us. I mean, the Bucks are everything. So I mean, he's a huge contributor in that. And I mean, yeah, that's all I can really say. I mean, we appreciate him so much, and just really horrible news. But the cool moment is too, and we were at that ring ceremony game too, the first game of the year, and we got to witness that moment where Adam Silver gave him the ring, and obviously, I mean, it was kind of a no-brainer, but it was kind of a cool moment because it did kind of, I mean, he was older, but it did seem very surprised by it, and it was just an awesome moment. So I'm kind of glad that we kind of got that like we got to witness that in person, and that was kind of our last memory of him in person. But I also have a funny photo, not that anybody would even know this, but I found like a funny photo of, maybe I'll post it one day. It was like it had to be like 2008-ish, 7, 6, of like a bunch of Bucks fans wearing like trash bags over their heads. And Herb Cole's in that photo, and I'm looking in the background, and my dad's in the background of that photo. And I'm pretty sure I was at that game with him, but the fact that I was like 6 rows behind, or my dad was 6 rows behind Herb Cole during like this awful moment of like Bucks fans, and to think of where we are right now, it's just kind of insane. So, I'm glad he got to witness kind of that full turn and everything too. But, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, no, I think the ring night was I first of all, like you said, we were there together. It was a super cool moment in general. But honestly, for even in that moment, that was like the coolest part of it for me was Herb Cole getting a huge ovation and getting the ring. And obviously, like you said, he was pretty old at that point, but he had his old like mid 2000s Bucks hat on still that he had probably been wearing for decades. And just it was really cool to see him get that respect because, like I said, I think a lot of people did have basketball type issues with him at times as an owner just because of the way he wanted to operate. But like you said, it all came from a really good place of him just wanting people to be able to enjoy the Bucks. And to him, that meant trying to compete every year. And there can be disagreement on that and whatever, but it came from a really good place. And like you said, we're not here talking about, we wouldn't be having a Supersonics podcast. I can tell you that right now. And I mean, can you imagine if this is Giannis just starting to break out and now they move? Like, I'm heartbroken. I hate the NBA. I'm not watching. Like, it would have ruined me for years if I watched Giannis have to play for Seattle and take over the league in Seattle. Like, that would have ruined everything for me. So, super thankful to him and just yeah, rest in peace because everything he did for the Bucks and like I said for the state and just overall it sounds like from every account I've ever heard one of the nicest down to earth people you will find, especially for someone who was able to turn down $550 million basically like somebody who any he just could have a conversation with anybody and I think that's pretty cool and not super common for people who are as well off as he is. So um yeah, anything else to add on that before we move into the recaps?
nope. Now we just got to talk about these 3 games here this week. So we had 3 games to cover this week. Uh, Bucks began the week closing out the season series against the Pacers. Uh, we unfortunately lost that season series 1-4, losing in back-to-back games there. However, we were able to turn things around tonight versus the Spurs. But let's start with those Pacer games, I guess. Uh, we're probably going to mix in a little bit of each of these games, but we can start with game one, I guess, of sort of our key moments, I guess, from that first game. And I'll just start with like 2 big ones, and then I'll toss it to you. But since, I mean, it feels like that was like a long time ago after these last 2 games. But my 2 biggest points in that one, obviously, if you look at just the box score, the Pacers shot historically horrible from three and somehow still scoring 120 points plus. It's just it's almost impressive how you can actually lose a game like that in today's NBA where you can shoot that. I mean, they didn't shoot a ton of threes. I mean, 35 is like average now, but to hit 5 of them and then they were kind of keeping pace the whole time and we never could really take advantage of that. Granted, we shot 25% too, but just not to be able to take advantage of like a poor shooting night like that, where usually that's usually how teams kind of get ahead of us sometimes. But that was the biggest thing for me. And then really the biggest difference for me in this one too is Pat and Bobby. Uh, I don't want to break down everything they did wrong in this one, but just both of them were like minus 20, I think, each in this one. And it was very clear that they were a problem. And I mean, the bench is going to be a theme here over these next 3 games when we talk about it. But they just, we got to figure something out. I think Pat, to me, doesn't bother me as much in certain lineups. I think he can work, but Bobby, I don't know. It's just I'm getting really tired of Bobby. I'm sorry. I got to make a statement at some point here. He's just I don't even know. You can probably take this one away because I know you've been heating up on Bobby, but yeah, I'll just let you take this one away before I start
Uh,
going off.
I listen, what Bobby did in the Hawks series after Giannis went down and in game 6 of the finals will forever be appreciated. Him taking a much smaller contract than he could have gotten somewhere else will forever be appreciated. That said, it is time to get something for Bobby. He is not a helpful player. He can't be on the court against any decent team, really. And tonight against the Spurs, which we'll talk about later, but he can't even play in those types of games at the moment. I mean, the guy went from that first season just being a knockdown shooter to, for some reason, thinking he needed to change his shot. And I tweeted something about it today, but for Badger fans, like if you remember the Nigel Hayes progression from being a slow, high release jump shooter who just made every open shot he had his freshman year to being someone who tried to quicken up his release and lowered it in the process, and all of a sudden not being able to make shots. That's what Bobby is to me. Um, he really struggled in all three games. Like you said, in that first game, him and Pat were both pretty unplayable in any lineup that they were in. A theme we're going to see from all three of these games again. Our starters are playing a ton of minutes, just a ton of minutes, and they have to. Unfortunately, right now they have to, or they won't be able to win games. And that's a big, big problem. It's just for Bobby, you don't get any defense. He can't guard any position at any level of the court. He can't protect the rim. He can't move his feet. He will once in a while like blitz somebody in a pick and roll and get a steal, and that's probably the only time he's somewhat valuable on that end. Um, and if he's not going to make threes, I mean, the offense isn't even that valuable. A post up to Bobby is an automatic shot. He's basically never passing out of the post. He's even, I would say, passing more out of the post this year, and it's still one of the biggest black holes you can find. Um, I actually saw something today that I'll try and find it for later on when we talk about one of the other games, but Bobby's one of the big, like, there's a stat showing how much he gets a post up and how often the shot goes up and never comes. Nobody else ever touches the ball again once he catches in the post. It's pretty insane. It's like second highest in the NBA. And the guy above him is whoever it was a much more efficient scorer from that spot too. So there's just very little he's bringing to the team right now, and energy is awesome, but his energy to me feels fake almost, where it's not helpful at all. Like it's not helpful energy in the slightest. It's all just for show. Energy that helps is somebody who plays hard on defense and boxes out and does stuff like that. Energy that doesn't help is somebody who elbows a guy in the throat while he's making a post move and then stares him down and then pumps the crowd up and everyone starts cheering his name. That's not helpful. That's not doing anything positive for the Bucks. And I get it. He's a fan favorite. People don't like when he gets ripped on. And I like Bobby. And again, there's a lot of things to be thankful for what he's done here, but I am ready to, if they can get anybody who's a playoff caliber player that you can use in a playoff series for him, I don't care what position it is, do it and do it immediately. Like
Mhm.
I don't care. And if you have to pack or if you can package Patton, Bobby or something in that regard, like do that. But it's it's getting really hard to watch, like you said. It's been hard to watch for a while. It's just been hard to say that because people don't like hearing it. But at this point, we got to say it because it's not
Yeah.
enjoyable at all.
I was gonna say too, some of those texts, it seems like it's always on opportunities where he's literally getting smoked on the play. Like when he's like hyping the crowd, he's getting burned every single time, and it's just like, why are you throwing an elbow after you just got smoked? You did nothing on defense, and it's just like, oh yeah, I'll follow him extra and get a technical. It doesn't. You just doubled like we just lost like an extra point because now you're stupid plus the extra basket. But I think with Bobby too, it's we talked about these last few years off of the podcast, but if he was more of like a guy where if we had we don't necessarily need a backup center, but just more size. I think if you could play him at like a three where he doesn't have to be so reliant and like in this defensive scheme now it's a little different. I guess I'm thinking more of like Bud scheme, but I just think and we're gonna talk about kind of Brook later on. Um, you just Brook's getting so overused at this point, and it's almost not his fault in this way, but he's playing every single game, having to take so much of a burden. And like I said, we're going to talk about this more in depth later on, but we literally cannot give Brook Lopez a break because if we're relying on Bobby to be his backup, we're gonna get smoked. And like if we're that reliant on Brook, it's just gonna suck for everybody else. But again, we'll talk about that later in the podcast. But we should also note that Bruce Brown was not in this game too. And he's obviously a Bucks killer and in his own right, but just in a game where I think it was very winnable and against a high like a Pacers team who has this high functioning offense and stuff, where you're kind of able to slow it down a little bit and just did not take advantage of it whatsoever. And we again we'll talk about this later in the podcast as well, but Tyrese kind of had that mid-range floater going on too. Now it's just kind of waiting for him to pick up on it. Like if he figures this out, like it's just going to be given to him every single time, this is going to be bad for us. And kind of the theme of both of these games, I guess we can switch over to the next one, but it was just sort of like you, if we're getting into shootouts, I just sometimes I'll trust us, but it's just against like the Pacers team, I'm not going to trust us in a shootout. And it wasn't really a shootout because again, we were throwing up bricks, both teams were, but we just could not take advantage of that one whatsoever. And we did have a lead in this one as well. Um, and it came down to, again, something I talked about, a Giannis three, that again, it's not a direct translation to why we lost the lead, but it just seems like every single time we have a big lead, it's just like Giannis is like, I'll just hurl one and I'm getting subbed out, so I'm just gonna hurl one. And then like literally immediately after the league gets wiped away, and that's lineups and rotations and whatnot. But I mean, and that's alludes to the bench again as well. I mean, literally none of our starters can get a break at this point to where we can just be a zero and give them a break and then come back and take off and take the lead. But um I guess do you have anything more on this first game or you want to switch over to the
No,
second one?
I think we can talk about the second and then just kind of talk about everything
Yeah.
between those two, because there were some common themes for sure. Um,
Yeah.
so I mean that second game we saw, I mean 142 to 130 final score. That's the Bucks can score up around 140, but if you're giving up 140, you're not winning many games no matter who you are. Um, like we said, they shot terribly from three the game before. They shot 40% from three in this game, so I mean it was 14 of 35. I don't know. I mean, that's a decent game for sure, but it's not like an outlier game where, okay, we gave up 142 because they just could not miss from three. Like, no, they were still just getting to the paint and getting to the rim at will. Um, Tyrese had a huge game, obviously, again, 31 and 12. I, I don't even have that much to say specifically on this game. So if you want to talk about that a little bit, but I just want to talk about the Pacers and all of that in general. So if you got anything specific,
Yeah, you
go
can
ahead
go
and do
next then. I got a little couple notes here, but kind of my shootout aspect. If we're just trading baskets with the Pacers, I don't feel comfortable whatsoever. Um, and I think the noticeable changes I saw kind of from game one to game two, where we didn't really have an answer for Tyrese and we're putting like Malik on him, which again happened sort of in this one, but we kind of went towards kind of Chris guarding him a little bit. And I think that worked out a little bit better for at least a decent stretch. And I think Adrian Griffin even like said, like, I thought we handled him pretty well until like the end where he started making threes where I guess like that still counts. But yeah, I mean at that point the game got away anyways. So I mean if he's counting that then whatever. But Chris did do a pretty decent job, but also again, like I think if you're in a situation where Chris and I love Chris and Chris can easily do it, it's not like I don't think he can do it, but if I have to rely on Chris to like slow down Tyrese for like 40 minutes in a game, we're not gonna win. It's just not going to
it.
happen. It's not sustainable in a playoff series, and this is probably what you're going to talk about if this was like a playoff series next. But that's not going to be a formula that's probably going to work over a series because Chris is going to get worn down, and it's just maybe more. This is would work more, I guess, this season than in past. But I mean, he's older and has injuries and stuff. Just because we have Dame and Giannis, it's not like you got to worry about Chris dying out. Then your offense is going to die out and stuff like that. But I just don't think that's a winning formula. I think I finally kind of crapped on Marjan to you in this one too. I said, can he do something on the floor for the love, for the love of any? Let's just do something. I'm so tired of him just kind of jogging in the corner and just not really doing much. And then he started to do a little something. Then he started kind of getting the dunker spot and kind of putting baskets in. Um, and then we saw that in the Spurs game too. He kind of stepped up as well. But those are kind of my big changes from game one to game two. And then I mean, Dame, I mean, we could talk about him a little bit too. He just cannot find it. I wonder if it's what his stats are against the Pacers this year. It's probably not very great. And I like his quote too. And it's more of like his personality, so I get it. And it's funny, but he loves to never give the other team any credit when he's not shooting well. And he's just like, yeah, I mean, it wasn't nothing they did. It was just I was just missing shots and they felt good. And I think that there is some truth to that because it did just kind of seem like he was missing shots, not like he had like horrible games where I'm like, ugh, like he's a negative on the floor. It's just like he wasn't making his shots. But at some point you got to make the shots and they're open. And it kind of came down to we got it down to I think it would have been like I think it was 15 or something, but then we had back-to-back threes
It was
that
12, 12.
12. Yeah, okay,
Yep.
so it's 12. Yeah, because I was thinking we should have made one of them at least to get it to nine. But
Yeah.
if we would have, we had back-to-back threes from Dame and Bees where it kind of could have made it interesting. But again, I mean, you're already behind the eight ball. But once you miss both of those wide open shots from two guys who should normally make those, it just felt like that was the end of the game. And then something new we got in this one too, I should have mentioned earlier, was we got Ajax in the fourth, which kind of allowed Giannis to play the five, which again, I love that situation. And I even kind of texted it to you too. I said, well, we actually might come back with this lineup because we actually got Ajax in a nice lineup where he can kind of distribute and it kind of makes sense for him to finally be in that lineup. And again, speaking to that Giannis at the five, it worked in that finals run. It can work in small spurts, but kind of like we just saw Wembanyama, there's a reason why Wembanyama shouldn't be playing the 82 games a year and throughout the playoffs because it just kind of wears you down. So you got to pick your spots with it. And I think it was a good experiment too to use because you will need that in the playoffs. And I've always kind of begged for that in the playoffs. Um, and it did work for a while. Again, it's just we were way too behind at that point to even kind of make a dent. But that was something that I was kind of excited for, I guess, at that point because it was something new that we've seen in the fourth. And just again, I mean, we could talk about Adrian Griffin too, and he's made some changes. I think I want to end it off on this too before I give it to you, but he got a technical in this game, and every time he gets a technical foul, it's just like he's almost like just trying to hit the quota. Like he's just like, oh yeah, I got my technical, and now everyone loves me. It's just like he's not even mad at. I don't remember what the play was. It's just like he got a tech. I think it was like a Dame foul maybe or something, or
I
I
don't
just
even
don't.
remember either.
Yeah, it was like it didn't even really deserve a tech, and we're coming back, so it's like we don't need an extra an extra bucket here either. Like, and it's just like he's not even like I said, he's not even mad. He just gets a tech, and he's just like, all right, where's my clipboard? Like, it's just why are you doing that? At least, and not to pin him against Bud, but I think Bud at least would lose his mind, and we'd get the great memes from Bud on the sidelines. Like he's just blown away by the call, and it's funny and stuff. And I think guys do appreciate technical fouls, but ever since kind of Giannis felt like he wasn't getting calls and stuff, it's just like he thinks that's a way to like back up his players. But I just wanted to end on that because I thought it was funny, and I've noticed that throughout the year. So I assume you're going to take it sort of in the direction of against the Pacers as a whole and what that means. So yeah, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah. Well, I'll touch on a couple of the. First of all, 100% agree that these Griff technicals just feel like they're for show. Like you said, normally when someone gets a tech, they have to be almost calmed down by somebody. Griffin is mad until he gets a tech, and then he immediately just stands there. Almost, I think you actually texted me saying, like, he looks like he's trying to look cool after he gets a tech. Like, that is what it looks like. It looks like he's just trying to be like, yep, did my job, got a tech. And if you remember when he got tossed against Indiana, that was after the Giannis ejection against the Pistons, and he got thrown out, and then he just immediately like walked off the court like the day after saying, "Oh, I need to get a tech if I or I need to protect my players." Like it just doesn't feel real, which I think as a player I would notice that. Maybe the players appreciate it. I don't know for sure, but for me, it would feel like, okay, he's just doing this to do this. Like, what is this helping? And like you said, it's giving them. I think Hield actually missed the free throw yesterday, so it didn't end up costing us a point, but it was still like, what was the point? What was the point of that? Um, and then along the lines of Dame, it is weird because, well, like you said, Bruce Brown was back for the second game, so he was on Dame a decent amount of the time. That's at least a good defender guarding him. That first game, it was Tyrese and McConnell, who's annoying but pretty beatable, and Buddy Hield. Like those are guys who are he can get past and get to the lane and score. Um, it felt like he was settling a little bit in that one. I actually thought the second game that he mostly took good shots and that they mostly looked good coming out of his hand. He had like four rim in and out, I feel like yesterday, or a couple, yeah, it was yesterday, I guess. Um, he's if we see him in the playoffs, I just don't doubt that he's going to be able to score more and that he'll figure things out. But I do think it was a big part of these losses that he was bad. And people, there's like a Twitter war going on between Bucks fans and Dame fans right now, where Dame fans are just upset saying he's not getting the ball enough. He's not doing like he's touching the ball basically the same amount as Giannis is this year. And Giannis deserves to touch the ball a decent amount because he is playing really well with the ball in his hands. He just needs to make open shots. And he's a jump shooter. There are going to be games and stretches where he doesn't. And that's part of it. It's part of being a jump shooter. Something I've been trying to explain to people about Chris for years. If you shoot a lot of outside shots, there are going to be bad games because those are days where you're just not feeling it. The weird thing with Dame is that it has felt like most of the year he can get to the line by driving. And sometimes lately it feels like when he's struggling, instead of doing that, he's just been settling or he's just been deferring and getting the ball out of his hands and then not doing much. And that is the bigger concern for me. I think he needs to still demand the ball, still be aggressive, use his gravity to create open shots for people, but just standing on the outside, like there's a level of they're not going to leave him alone that can create some gravity, but it's not the same as him having the ball and moving defenders by driving or by rotating the ball quickly and stuff like that. So hopefully we find a little bit more of that. I think the fourth quarter of the Spurs game that we'll get to in a few minutes here, we've talked a lot about these Pacers, but I think that was a good sign of things to come, hopefully, because he did kind of get back into that. Okay, I can get to the hoop here. I can do this at any time I want type of mode. Um, so hopefully that's a sign of things to come. But just I don't even want to talk too much about specifics against the Pacers. I want to talk about the fact that the Bucks are allowing themselves to kind of get bullied by the Pacers. It feels like this year by a team that's much younger than them, by a team that has way less experience, way less playoff experience. There's no reason for them to let them get under their skin as much, for the Bucks to let the Pacers get under their skin as much as they have been. And I don't mind, like you texted me like you don't mind Dame or Brooke talking to guys. Like I don't mind it either. But when we watched it in that second Pacers game, it just felt like they were doing it out of like annoying, like they weren't talking to try and annoy the other team. It was just because they were getting annoyed and they were talking back and they weren't focusing on what was actually important. And there were multiple times Chris was walking up to Brooke yesterday and Dame did it a couple times too, putting his arm around him like, dude, let's focus back up. Like, what are we doing right now? You just keep talking. Who is he talking to? Isaiah Jackson, right?
Yes, a lot of it's been Isaiah Jackson.
And like you're letting their backup big get under your skin that much. And you texted me and said at one point, like it felt kind of like the Heat series where we were just letting a team punch us in the face, and our only response was to like pout about it. Like instead of going back at them with our own physicality and back at them with an aggressiveness. And I feel like I've noticed that a lot the last few years, last couple years. I mean, post PJ and probably pre PJ, it's kind of been a problem for the Bucks. And we won't go too far into why we should or who we need to acquire and all that stuff. But I think we need somebody with that type of mentality to be like to cut that out of the rest of the team. And I think someone like Jay being on the court could help with that. He's pretty good at that type of stuff, I feel like. But someone who can just get the Bucks to say to be the bullies, I guess, in like the most schoolyard type of like in the most like elementary school type of
Hmm.
way to describe it. Like the Bucks need to be the team that kind of bullies the other team sometimes. And I think going back to our Bobby point, Bobby tries to do that and he's just bad at it. And when you don't defend or anything, no one's gonna care that you're talking a lot and trying to do all this stuff. Like, yep, you're 4 of 12. Congrats, Bobby. You haven't defended us once. We just go right by you and score. Like you talking means nothing to us. You can hit me with an elbow and get your tech if you want, but like we'll just keep talking and you'll just keep responding in a negative way and it's not going to help anybody. So I don't know. Those two games, I don't care about two losses in a row. It's just the way these losses feel sometimes are what concern me more than anything else. I know people like to point to the record, and we've talked about it a lot. Like the record is good. It's now 25-10 after the Spurs game, I believe, right?
Yep.
But there's still a ton of reason to have concerns, and you can talk about this too if you want to talk about it, but we haven't brought it up, but the Bucks' strength of schedule has been one of the easiest in the NBA so far this year. And you can say what you want about it. I don't think there's a ton of correlation between strength of schedule and like playoff success, but there is a correlation between strength of schedule and winning games that you maybe don't deserve to win because you're just playing teams that are much less talented than you. And it feels like the Bucks have gotten away with that a lot in December, and the record kind of covered up a lot of these issues that they do have. So I don't know if you want to talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean Charles Barkley actually had a good point before this game against the Spurs pregame. He said that winning does kind of cover up a lot of mistakes. So in a way, and he obviously doesn't watch us every single game, and he knows all of what we were just saying. But he did point to kind of these last two games, like if let's say that we did sink those games out barely, but we still had those clear holes that we had. And it seems like we kind of just like, oh, well, we won, so we don't need to fix it. So in a way, and we talked about that Heat series. If this, let's say that was a playoff series, we lost to the Heat 4 games to 1, and we just lost to the Pacers 4 games to 1. I think what's discouraging about that is we just went through the Heat series 6 months ago. Like, how can you let another team do this to you? That's not even as experienced as the Heat. Maybe I guess we can talk about like records and stuff. I mean, we could actually play the Pacers in the playoffs, but I just think that's the more concerning part is we didn't have a ton of personnel change outside of coaching, and it just felt like I'm just gonna be crapping my pants in the playoffs no matter who we play at this point because I just don't have any trust unless we make a move or something like you said that will change kind of our mentality. But I just don't think we've learned much, unfortunately. And that can change. Literally could change the next game or the next week or the next month. We could see a huge difference, but it's just been very discouraging. And yeah, I just think the winning has covered up a lot of our mistakes, like Charles said. And I don't want to lose these games. I'm not praying for our downfall just so we can hype up and I could say I was right and stuff like that. But we just need to figure out the problems. And yeah, so I guess I could lead us into the Spurs game if you want, since we did kind of a good example, I guess, because a game where a 5-win team we're walking into, and Chris did play a back to back here, so that was nice to see, but only played the first half. Um, but again, a team where you should probably put away, and they did have Wemby. But I mean, what do you want to speak to this one about? I guess because it's just he only played. Chris only played in the first half, but he did look really good. So I think
Yeah.
that was kind of threw our vibe off a little bit in the second half too, because we did rely on him a lot. Um, and then all of a sudden he's out of the rotation. So I don't know. I'm sure that was pre-planned and everything, but that sucked. The bench sucked again today. Everyone was a minus outside of Pat. Um, and I think a bigger issue too here, what I want to talk about is can we stop defending guys like 40 feet from the basket just to get torched and
I
blown by? And that goes to the Brook point again too. If it's almost just disrespectful at this point to put to put these guys in that situation and just to get smoked. It's just like we're giving up easy baskets and we're not making it hard for anybody. And Giannis versus Wemby is going to be a whole different section because that was awesome to watch. But that's just kind of my biggest issue at this point is just simple stuff like that. And I don't know. I guess you have anything to speak on that point of it is I know it's been a big topic on Twitter and stuff is we've been pressuring a lot and it's not putting us in a great position.
It's been a topic on Twitter. I think I said it like week three. Like I think you could not solve the defensive problems, but I think you could lessen them quite a bit by just saying, hey, you're guarding at the 3-point line unless it's Steph Curry or Trae Young. The other guy that's kind of in that type of discussion is the guy playing point guard for the Bucks. You don't need to pressure people at half court. If you have guys like Javon Carter and Drew Holiday who can do it, then yeah, go for it. Do it. You do not have that. In fact, you have guys who can barely do it if you guard them at the 3-point line. So why are we making it even harder for them to guard the people on the perimeter? It makes no sense. It's the simplest fix he could possibly make. And we're 35 games in and he hasn't made it. And say whatever you want. I'm not as like anti Adrian Griffin as some people. That's concerning. It's concerning. It is the easiest thing in the world that almost anybody can see, and he is not making that change, and I don't get it. I mean, you talked about Andre Jackson at the 4 a little bit yesterday or in the second Pacers game. He doesn't play the first half of this game. He had a good game in that second game against the Pacers in general. He played well. He played in that position in that game. He comes in today and they've got him picking up Trey Jones three-quarters court. Like, why? What is the point of that? What? And he can't do that. He moves well for his size, but he is not like a. The Bucks still don't have one guy who can just guard perimeter ball handlers on the outside. Like Ajax and Marjan are okay at it, but they're still not people you want guarding that far out because they're going to get blown by. And in Ajax's case, he's going to get called for fouls, even if sometimes he's not, and he is moving his feet well. So that doesn't help that cause either. Um, there's just that's the easiest fix to me, and I can't believe it hasn't been done yet. I'm hoping every single game that all of a sudden we're going to see it, and we just don't. So I don't know where we're going to go on that, but hopefully it's a change soon.
So that actually leads us into what I wanted to talk about today. And this was kind of a question I had even before this one, but and I didn't get the updated stats on this either after this game, but I can't imagine it got much better. So the Bucks are allowing the most field goal attempts from 8 to 24 feet from the basket in the league. Um, and really I should have even went in the restricted area, but it's got to be bottom five still, but I want to give Brook being in there kind of makes it a little bit better, obviously, but I kind of wanted to paint a picture for you guys here. And so we're 20th in the league in opponents' field goals made in the restricted area, and attempts is probably worse or than that, I guess. Is it worse or best? I guess it would be worse. I always mess it up going backwards. And then we're 25th in the league in opponents' field goals made in the paint, so non-restricted area, moving on a little bit. And then we're 30th in opponent opponents' mid-range attempts. So I think with a spread like that, it's obviously very. I think the mid-rangers are very purposeful because the way we're playing defenses, we don't have perimeter defenders, so we're just. I think if you can make them shoot mid-rangers, I actually could live with that part of this equation. So I actually don't really mind that much, but I think the problem is too when they're getting too deep into the paint, and like we talked about before, that's why I think this led into this grade is we're overworking Brook and putting him in such a bad position so many times, and he has taken a little bit of a step back, I would say. And I've kind of felt like this maybe a couple years ago with Brook, and then obviously last year he was a monster, so I had nothing to say last year. And I kind of thought this was kind of where it was gonna go, and he took a huge step up, like I said last year. So I didn't think it'd kind of come back down for him, but I think part of it too is like I said, this the overworked part of him, where it's just we're putting him in such a bad position. And I guess, I mean, you can speak to it too, but I think that's just the biggest thing is it's by design to where it's it's like counterproductive, where it's like we're putting up like zero fight. And I talked about those floaters with like Bruce Brown and Tyrese, like against those guys, you do have to adjust a little bit, I would say, because it's almost too much of a gimme. Um, but I guess yeah. So what do you think about this? And I guess you can speak to Brooke a little bit too. And you're obviously a big Brook fan, and I'm a big Brook fan too, but I've been more critical of him than you have. But I guess speak about all of it.
Yeah. So, like you said, 30th in opponent mid-range attempts. I don't care about that in general. Like, I want teams shooting mid-range shots still against the Bucks. I know it's a shot that there are certain players you probably don't want shooting them as much. Like you said, kind of Tyrese or even, I mean, Brown's floater has gotten pretty good. It's much better than it was in like that Nets series when we basically just dared him to take those all day. And outside of, I think, one game where he kind of hit them, it was a huge thing for our defense just to let him take that mid-range shot or that floater. Um, the thing for me is it goes back to what we were just talking about with the pressuring the ball so high up. Here's the difference between getting blown by at half court or getting blown by at the 3-point line. The difference is about 25 feet of ground that Brook has to try and worry about. Like, Brook is, if someone gets blown by at the 3-point line and is contesting from behind, that means Brook is probably stepping one step, two steps up to contest any shot. And that's all he has to worry about. And that puts him in a position where they can't just automatically dump it down to his guy underneath. The further you extend that ball pressure, the further that Brook is going to have to go up to contest any shot that someone else is going to be taking from the mid-range, floater, whatever. And the less likely that someone is there to actually contest the shot or make them field them from behind on the shot. That to me is still going to be the biggest issue. Now, like you touched on, I do think Brook is having a worse season in terms of like when he's in position, making plays and contesting shots as well. But I think so much of it is that not only is this harder on him in terms of, like you said, he's got, or like I said, he's got to cover more ground like you were talking about, it's just a really big workload. I think he also has to think so much more in this one, and he's more concerned about all these other things going on around him because he feels like he's playing cleanup for everybody. And that's not a good place to be in. I feel like the only person who honestly has been able to handle having almost no perimeter defenders and just cleaning up at the rim is Rudy Gobert. When he was with the Jazz, when they were running out a pretty rough defensive backcourt and wings, and Gobert could clean that all up. But Gobert was younger, he was longer, and he was, I mean, they're neither are quick, but he's a little quicker. Brook has shown that if you're playing the drop correctly, he's going to be in the right spot and he's going to contest the shot. And maybe they'll make him. And yes, he's going to be late sometimes. And at times it's going to feel like he's not doing anything because they're just making these floaters over him. But I still feel like a lot of these shots that are going in, he's doing what he can do on them. I think the issue still is going to come back to this ball pressure. And like I said at the beginning of talking about that, it's not going to fix everything. There's nothing that can fix everything with the current team that the Bucks have. There is nothing that can make this a top 10 defense with this current roster. It doesn't matter what they do. It's not going to happen. It would take insane, I shouldn't say that. It would take insane luck in terms of the other team just missing every shot. Because they're not good enough at the point of attack. I don't think they have one guy who can truly guard at the point of attack. So just this insistence on making it even more difficult on them is just shockingly, I don't even know how to describe it. It makes no sense to me.
Hmm. I think the scary thing too is I just pulled up the stat right now while you were talking, and just going back a year ago, I think why I wanted to bring this up is because we were fourth in restricted area fewest attempts allowed by people, so people just weren't challenging Brook. Like he was so good that people didn't even want to go in there. And now flipping that coin, it's literally the exact opposite. So I think you just have to raise a question of like, why do teams, and it's not again solely Brook. Brook's been out there 48 minutes. There's a reason why people think they can attack us in the paint without Brook in there because Bobby's down there or nobody's down there. If you're playing zone or something stupid, but I think it is more concerning of just like it was just more of a security blanket that we had in the regular season, what we talked about in past episodes. And now it just seems like our like that was our last line of defense, and people are just like, we don't care. We'll just keep trying to. And like you said, we talked about Brook, but I guess why do you think it's more inviting for teams to come in the paint this year than in the past? Because we've tried the drop and stuff, and like I said, this is not a solely Brook problem. But do you think maybe do we need somebody else? Do we need like a backup center to do what Brook's doing or something? Or how do you get people out of the restricted area? I guess.
You guard them on the perimeter.
Yeah.
You have to be able to slow them. They're the biggest thing is going at Brook as a guard when you have been slowed down multiple times as you're trying to get there makes it a lot harder to attack him. If you're just running at Brook full speed for 20 feet because nobody has stopped you or even attempted to stop you, yeah, it's gonna be a lot more inviting to go at him, and it gives you a lot more. It's not even just space like to pull up; it's space to euro, and it's space to drop it off to a big because Brook had to step up an extra step. And like I said, I do think Brook is probably like I think he's a little off in terms of like his timing on a lot of stuff, but I think there's an element of him just overthinking it because he's so discombobulated down there because people aren't helping him at all. And I don't know. I get that people like it looks bad. I'm not going to deny like watching Jared Allen going crazy in that Cavs game was infuriating. He kind of slowed him down in the second half, and it really didn't end up being that insane of a game for Allen. But when you watch that stuff, you have to understand that Brook almost on almost all of those plays, first of all, was either a Jared Allen like free throw line mid-range shot. Like, yes, he was making them early in that game, but that is not a shot that I care about if he's taking it. Like, I don't. He can take that the whole game, and I guarantee you he will start missing them. And he did. He even banked one in during that stretch. Like, everything was going in for him for a while. For Brook, he knows percentages really well. He's smart about those things. So he's okay with Jared Allen catching that. Now he's stepping up to guard Allen, and now guards get to the rim because he's trying to help or make sure that Allen's not getting that little floater or that mid range. It just puts him in a very awkward position. And he's not perfect. And I'm again, like you said, this is not all on Brook, and I don't think this is none of this is on Brook. But I lean a lot more towards the rest of the roster and the scheme causing these issues than I do Brook in general. I don't think this is a Brook problem. I think this is a rest of the situation problem.
Yeah. I mean, just to wrap it up too, I just brought this up because I am very scared and concerned. And it's hard to explain, like we talked about when you're 25 and 10, and I'm just trying to pull stats to sort of not make people scared too, but just to show why I'm so concerned. I'll just make a small prediction to wrap it up. I do think Bobby and or Pat will be traded for somebody. I think John Horst is very smart, and he's looking at these stats more than I did when I just pulled them up on my couch 2 hours ago. He's probably sweating looking at all this stuff, and he's trying to figure it out. And I just think it's too glaring of a hole that we have, and I do think a change will be coming. But if it's one or the other or both, I mean that's all we've got. So I do think something will come for help. But so to move on to wrap this game up, obviously the big ticket here was Giannis versus Wemby. If there's a silver lining to a close game versus the Spurs, I guess we got a good show between both of them. I think Giannis had like 44 points. Wemby, I think, has on a minute restriction too, so he was like 26 or something he got, which actually I think is more than what he usually was getting. Um, I think for me, I'll speak with on Wemby, and we can speak on Giannis all the time. I mean, he does it like every other night, so I don't know what else to really say about Giannis, but he did have obviously a really good game, and Giannis kind of closed it out there in the fourth, being very aggressive and stuff. And he hit two big threes out of nowhere. It seemed like our world was ending and collapsing. And all of a sudden, he hits two nice looking threes. I'm like, and I'm the guy who doesn't want him to shoot threes. So I'm like, well, now what do I do anymore? I don't know what this team is anymore. Um, so that'll be my one Giannis tidbit. You can talk about him if you want, but I'll throw one Wemby thing out there. I did kind of assume he would struggle shooting this year, but he is just a monster on defense, and that this cannot be ignored. I am literally, I like Dame shot like a layup towards the end of the game. I'm like, I didn't think it was going in because he was kind of out of control, but I'm like, oh, he's in the clear, and he got like blocked. And then Dame's like, oh, it got goaltended. No, it wasn't goaltended. That was just Wembanyama's arm somehow blocking that. It didn't because he couldn't even believe it got blocked. Um, but yeah, he was just insane, and they did have some cool moments kind of going back and forth. Giannis kind of dunked on him a little bit, and then Wemby stuffed it in his face, which is one of the best blocks on Giannis I think I've really ever seen. Because Giannis created nice space. Like he had like a second to dunk, and he still somehow created space and was able to block it. So it was just a fun game, I guess. In that aspect, I'm trying to ignore the fact that it was close. I'm trying to be positive. We got a nice win, and it was a nice show. But you got anything on those two guys?
Yeah, I mean, I've watched Wemby for a few years now because I just he's always been so incredible to me that like anytime he was on any sort of TV that I could watch him, I watched him. And I really feel like with the Spurs struggling and only a few like national TV games and stuff, I don't think people understand. Like you have to watch this guy play games to understand how good he is. Like his stats are really good for a rookie. But like you said, like the shooting numbers probably don't look great. I think it's like 29% and he was 2 of 8 from three today. Like that's not going to make anybody go crazy about it. But first of all, if you watch him shoot, like I think he's going to shoot fine over the course of his career. His shot looks very, very smooth. I think he's got some kinks he can work out in terms of like shooting it on the way up at times, kind of a Giannis problem in that regard. But watching him defend is special. He can cover the entire paint without moving. And then he just jumps and his arms can cover everything. Like even we didn't even I mean, he blocked a pat three where he jumped from almost probably the block. He blocked a corner three on Pat where I knew he was going to block it as Pat was going up to shoot it, but in Pat's eyes, I don't blame him for thinking he was wide open because he felt like he was wide open, and somehow Victor was able to just get out there and get a hand on it. He's just very fun to watch. I personally just think the other part of watching him is that he seems very engaged at all times. I think he knows the game really well. He's got a high IQ. I enjoy, I just enjoy watching him play, and like I hope that he can stay healthy. There's obviously always going to be concerns with that body type, But if he can, there's nothing stopping him from being one of the best players in the world. I mean, he's special. He's very, very fun to watch. I have NBA League Pass, and I watch the Spurs way more than I ever thought I would this year, just because I want to see him do whatever he's going to do on that given night. Like you said, it sucks that he's on a minute restriction right now, but I get why the Spurs are taking care of the ankle and stuff. It's not something you want to have lingering into his career. But he's super competitive. He hates losing. He loves winning. You can see it every time. Every time they lose, he's bummed out. If they win a game, like he's super pumped up. I think that's an important thing for a young player to have. I remember Giannis being like that as a rookie on that bad team. You could tell he wore the losses really hard, and when they'd win, he was super excited. Like I think that's a really big part of any player's development is being someone who genuinely cares way more about winning and losing than anything else. And I think he's got that. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, we're glossing over a 44-14-7 game from Giannis. He had one turnover, like 7 assists to one turnover. That's one of his best, probably assist to turnover ratios of the year. 19 of 28. Like you said, he hit the two threes. He was 2 for 3 from there. Only 6 free throws. A little surprising because they were pretty physical with him on the inside today, but he also didn't come up complaining very often or anything. So they must have, like we said, they got Wemby down there, and he's got really long arms who can get his hand on the ball in a lot of situations. And even guys like Jeremy Sohan are good at like stripping the ball and getting a hand on the ball in that way. But it was, it felt like it was honestly one of my favorite Giannis games of the year. We should probably talk about him and Dame having to play basically 40 minutes on the back second of a back-to-back against a 5-win team. That's a problem. And it goes
I was
back
trying
to
to be positive, Spencer, on the way out of here.
I know, but even going back to everything we talked about with the bench earlier, like we had to play those two 40 minutes on the second night of a back-to-back against a 5-win team. Like that just shouldn't have to happen ever. Um, we'll see what that means going forward in terms of I want to see the Bucks start being able to put away bad teams, getting guys rest. Um, we did talk about, I mean, we should mention, I know Dame was 1 of 6 from three today. He was 10 of 19 overall. He had 10 assists, no turnovers. He was pretty good. 25 and 10 with no turnovers. Like the three ball wasn't going, but I felt like he played a lot better today. Um,
And
I
the one
think
he
he,
made was like a Damian Lillard three. Like that kind of encouraged me too. If you're gonna make one, at least make it like that, where it's like, oh yeah, your confidence hasn't wavered really at all.
right. No, that's a super good point because yeah, at that time he was either 0 of 4 or 0 of 5. And he pulled up from like 10 feet behind the line on like semi transition and hit a three. So it was good to see him kind of get back into a rhythm. Like you said, Chris had a really good first half, but I it was good to get a win. I guess I'm not we talked about all the negatives. I'll like you said, let's keep positive to end this to wrap this thing up. Um you touched on it earlier too. Marjan looked confident. I don't know that I'm slightly surprised he was 3 of 8. Kind of felt like he was like 3 of 5 or something when I was watching the game. But he did get blocked a couple times when he got inside. But he's aggressive. I like seeing him aggressive. I texted you yesterday though, saying every single time I'm like, Marjan needs to be aggressive. And then the moment I see him put a dribble down and try and drive, I'm like, oh my God, what is he doing? He terrifies me when he starts trying to get inside. But it's getting a little better. I feel a little bit better about him doing that now, and it looks like he's trying to do it more. So hopefully that'll continue. Um, and
And
then
then
yeah,
naturally, Andre Jackson gets 4 minutes tonight too.
yeah,
So after we saw good things and the encouraging things in the second Pacers game, somehow he gets, especially with Chris being out in the second half, you would have thought like, oh, that's another nice opportunity he could have, and did not get it.
no,
Not sure
and
why there.
like I kind of touched on it earlier, but when he comes in now, he's guarding Trey Jones 3/4 court instead of being a small ball four. Like he's out there with Bobby and Giannis. Giannis was playing the five. I mean, maybe Bobby was playing the five technically, but Giannis was the one who was really in that role. Just put Ajax in for Bobby. Bobby doesn't need those minutes. Bobby was not doing anything helpful on either end again. Just put Ajax in those spots where he's got more room to kind of be himself and disrupt the play. But if he's just guarding a guy at half court, he's not going to be able to stay in front of him. And you're losing all of his instincts in terms of like jumping passes or getting a hand on a drive. Like he's super good at that stuff. So why don't we you let him do that on defense instead of saying, "Hey, go try to guard someone way faster than you 40 feet from the rim. Good luck. If it doesn't work, you're coming out after 5 minutes and you won't play again the rest of the game." Like they're putting him in a spot to not succeed. And we went negative now. But um, I will say, I know a lot of people have pointed to like his net rating and stuff as a reason why he shouldn't be playing. And I think there's merit to that. Like there's a reason why that stuff does matter and you can take some things from that. But I think in context of they're not putting him in the best place or in the best position to succeed, I just don't feel like a lot of this has been his fault that the net rating hasn't been good with him on the court. Now he has had struggles with getting blown by guards, and we talked about that. And I mean, it's an issue because it's not something he's super capable of. But that's all they're asking. They keep asking him to do. Like, give him opportunities to do what he's good at, and you see what happens in that Pacers game. He got put in, and he wasn't guarding Tyrese out at 10 feet behind the 3-point line. No, he was guarding their wings, and then he was all of a sudden wreaking some havoc on help side and doing a good job of like helping off drivers and jumping passes, and that's what he's really good at right now. So let him do what he's good at. I hope he keeps getting opportunities. I hope Marjan keeps getting opportunities because he is starting to show some promise in that regard. But we got to find something with the bench. And I texted you, like, I wouldn't even hate when I see Chris Livingston out there. I'm like, man, why not give him a couple minutes once in a while and see what he's doing? And I wouldn't hate AJ Green getting some more opportunities. At least he might make some open shots off the bench. It's I don't think we just have to keep going Portis, Payne, and Pat, which I'm calling the killer peas, and I am calling them that in a bad way because they killed the Bucks. It's it's not like I get why there's hesitancy to play young players in general, but the vets aren't doing anything helpful. So why don't we give the young players some chances to kind of work some kinks out, see what they can do, learn on the job? I kind of thought that we were going to get more of that with Griff than we have. And especially like Jay's out, Chris is playing half of a game. You would think these are the games that we would be able to see some of the younger guys. And Ajax got 5 minutes. Marjan got 17, which is still not that much. Um, it's it's tough because you need some of those guys to start figuring some things out. And I think the young guys are more likely to start putting some things together than the vets who seem to be more likely to keep declining as they're struggling. So, wow, we just completely went negative after we said we weren't
Yeah.
going to do that. But
Well, we can go positive to wrap it up here. We did get the first fan voting for the All-Star game. And Giannis did lead the way of the entire NBA in votes. And then Dame was second for the backcourt amongst guards. So not used to seeing Dame or this is the second guy in there for us and getting a ton of votes. I guess you can speak to it a little bit because I know our childhood is we talk about it a lot. And what does it mean to you to have two guys who are like right now are starters for the Eastern Conference?
yeah, it's pretty special. I mean, I texted you the other day talking about how that first time Giannis made the All-Star game, like I remember that was our freshman year, and we were probably on your dorm floor watching that game, just going nuts every time he scored. And just seeing him on that court was like, oh my God, the Bucks made it. Like we have an all-star. We got a guy who's playing in an all-star game and doing really well too, and getting some appreciation from a national audience for playing really well in an all-star game. Because most of our lives, we just didn't have an all-star at all. Like it went from Michael Redd to Giannis without any all-stars, which is just insane. It's insane. That's a decade. Like that doesn't happen. Um, so later on seeing Giannis and Chris make a game and Drew last year, it is really cool to see these guys, not even just like in terms of Chris getting it. That was just super cool for me as a huge Chris guy, as someone who I always felt was super underappreciated. It was great to see him get that nod. Drew absolutely earned his last year. He was fantastic, and especially in the first half of the regular season last year, he was having an incredible season in the regular season. I know the playoffs started to probably hinder a lot of people's memories in terms of that, but he had a great regular season last year and he absolutely earned his all-star spot. But seeing a guy who would be starting, having potentially two Bucks starting in an all-star game, that doesn't even sound real to me still, like, and even after all this other stuff. So um yeah, I'm sure you've got similar thoughts, but I don't know if you got anything else to add on that.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about like deserving it. I think people will probably question if Dame deserves that second guard spot. I think he's probably in like the mix of like four guys who should be, who has the chance to start. So I think he does earn it. And he's only going to get better too. I mean, he's kind of in a tough stretch here before like these last three games. I mean, he looked like pretty similar Dame stats throughout his career. So, I mean, if he catches a heater the next week, I mean, he's going to look like he deserved it even more. I think he deserves it right now. I mean, like I said, he's in that group. So. I don't want to see anybody bashing Dame for getting if he is a starter and he doesn't have like the most perfect stats ever. I don't know why there's a thing on Twitter too where I know people don't watch us all the time, but they act like Damien's like this like washed. Do you notice that? And like all the memes and stuff. I'm like, I like
They
I get he's having like a slightly down spurt here, but like it looks like Damian Lillard to me. Why is it like I don't understand it.
because they didn't watch him in Portland. He's not getting as many. His usage is way down from what it was in Portland. Like the counting stats are going to be down. Like you said, before this 3 game stretch, he was on a really, really good, like month-long stretch where he was fantastic. He got his season-long 3-point percentage way up to like a normal Dame looking number for a while. Now it's probably back down a little bit after the last 3 games, but he's I don't know. People want him to be bad. You know that too. They wanted him in Miami. National media wanted him in Miami. So people want to see him struggling here so they can be like, should have gone to Miami, should have been traded to Miami. Joe Cronin was just being, he just didn't want him in Miami. Like that's what everyone wants to say. It's, I don't know. He's, like you said, he's in a group that definitely has a case to be that second starter. Um, or to be one of the starters, I should say. If he has a good finish to this before the voting closes, whenever that is, probably a week or two before the game, I would imagine, um, he could very well earn that spot, and it wouldn't even be a question. Either way, he's probably tracking to make the All-Star team unless something crazy happens. So no matter what happens, I mean, there's been ups and downs with Dame this year for sure. It hasn't been perfect, and that's to be expected. But the fact that people are saying he's washed is insane. He's putting up 25 and 6 or whatever it is, and it's basically been his career averages, like you were saying. So yeah, I don't know. People just want it to be bad, I think. So that's the main reason. But speaking of guys who probably should have been all stars, no, I'm just kidding. But our random bucks that we have that we're doing at the end of every episode here. So Gunnar, why don't you lead us off this time? Who was your pick for random buck?
So I picked Brian Skinner. Uh, you brought up All Stars. This guy had an All Star goatee. That's all I really remember of Brian Skinner. And that's literally all I want to say about Brian Skinner. I was just thinking of somebody and I was thought of something funny and I literally just had a flashback to I don't even remember his face. I just remember his goatee and like it would get really sweaty and it would just kind of gross me out as a kid.
Yeah,
I don't remember a bucket he made. I don't remember a play that he made. I remember him on the court, but I don't remember anything else outside of that. So,
I
who
like
do you
it.
got?
I like it. I went with Hakeem Warwick. I like these big men that were here for like half a season apparently because I keep picking them. But um, Warwick was a guy that I actually knew. He was one of the first like college guys that wasn't like a superstar type player that I knew because he just had some insane dunks when he was at Syracuse. Um, he he only played 48 games with Bucks. He averaged 10 points a game with the Bucks. I just remember a few dunks he had. Really, that's the main reason I thought of him. But he was just kind of a guy who caught oops. He was on that 09 2010 team for half the season. Like I said, the first half. I don't remember. Oh, he was part of the Salmons trade, wasn't he?
Yeah, I was gonna say he got us a nice deal out of him. So
Yeah, yeah, well worth it then. But yeah, he caught a few lobs from like Brandon Jennings in a few games, and I enjoyed watching him in his stretch here. But I will gladly trade him and Joe Alexander and whatever else was part of that trade for what we got out of John Salmon. So
yeah,
thank you, Hakeem Warwick, for being part of that trade package.
I had like a child. This is a small thing off of your guy. I had like a small or a child like a child level reading book of like the NBA players, and for some reason Hakeem Wark was like on that page before we got him. So then when we signed him, like, oh my God, we have like the superstar Hakeem Wark. Like this guy's gonna be awesome. And he was not, but he did give us John Selmans, who was basically Dwayne Wade for like half a year. So I guess that sort of counts.
Yeah, we'll count it. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that's it for us on this one. So if you are listening, please like and subscribe on whatever platform you are on. Remember again to follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod. And again, please feel free to leave feedback for us on how we can get better. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time with a Brewers episode of some sort.